So today I'm going to discuss with you about the infectious diseases, and we have to study or we have to discuss about two infectious diseases. One is tuberculosis, and I'm taking this topic today. That is tuberculosis, and the next is hepatitis, infectious diseases. Okay, so let's talk about tuberculosis. We will be talking about what is tuberculosis, types of tuberculosis, what is the cause of this infection or this disease, what are the signs and symptoms associated with this disease, diagnosis, how we diagnose the infection, and how to prevent these infectious diseases or communicable diseases, right? So we have to, in this topic, we are going to cover all these subtopics. Okay, so we everybody knows about tuberculosis. Yes, class.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
So everybody knows what. How do you define tuberculosis? What is this disease is all
Infectious
about?
disease which mainly affects the lungs caused by a bacteria.
Mm. Caused by a bacteria. Yes. Anything else which you know about tuberculosis?
Made one person to the
Yes,
other.
the main mode of transmission from one person to another person. That is the main mode of transmission. It is the infectious disease which is spreaded through the bacteria which we called as Mycobacterium tuberculosis. There are so many species of Mycobacterium. They have rod-shaped bacilli bacteria having a common cell wall structure, which we are going to discuss. These are group of bacteria, and from these group of bacteria, this species, that is the tuberculosis, it is one of the main species which causes this disease, and as one of you told, it mainly infects the lungs. है ना? So basically, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, it is an inflammation of our lung tissue, which is caused by the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Uh, Anything else which you know about this infection and you would like to share with the class?
Ma'am, there's maybe blood came out now while coughing through the
Hmm.
lung.
Hmm. Hmm.
Ma'am, it can be treated, but if the treatment, if we even skip one medicine, then that the tuberculosis microbacterium becomes resistant towards the medicine.
Yes. Yes. So that is the sign and symptoms which you have talked about. That in this disease, how we get to know that the person is having uh, infected with a disease or the infection. I will be talking about what do you mean by infection. There is a difference between when we are saying infection and when we are saying active disease. So this is one of the sign and symptoms of active disease. What is the active disease? When you say there is a blood in the cuff or the sputum, in the medical term we call the cuff as a sputum. So if there is a blood in the cuff or sputum, then it is a symptom that the disease has reached to its active state, which we are calling as active state. Okay, so that is one of the sign and symptoms. And then yes, you
Yes.
should, yeah, yes.
Ma'am, it is also said that our cough for more than test for TB because prolonged coughing is also basically a symptom for TB.
Yes, so that is one of the government's programs, which public awareness programs, and you also sometime hear on radio and on TV, televisions, and on media, electronic media. That is one of the government program which make the people aware that if you are coughing more than 3 weeks, it might be TB because that is one of the symptom associated with the active disease infection ke baad. So that is again one of the symptom. Yeah. And you also know about the nature of this bacteria. That is, you also aware that if the person who have this active TB infection undergoing treatment, and if he or she left the treatment in between, then there are chances, of course not chances, 99.9% it will reoccur, or it will not recover completely. The person will not recover completely. The bacteria, it is capable of further dividing and causing the infection. That's why, and more so if the person does not complete the whole course of treatment, then the bacteria, it get what we say, एंटीबायोटिक्स देते हैं, तो एंटीबायोटिक्स का जो होता है उससे रेजिस्टेंस हो जाते हैं. सो दीज बैक्टीरिया दे डेवलप द रेजिस्टेंस if the course of treatment is left in between. So that again we get the awareness from the government programs which makes the people aware. You have heard about very famous program uh, to treat the TB, to make the awareness among the public, that is the DOTS. Yes, everybody has listened that know the treatment program which we called as dot treatment, right? So we all are aware that it should not be left in between if the person is having infection and taking a medicine or the treatment, because the biggest reason is that the bacteria will develop the resistance, and again the person will um, suffer from TB, get the chances of infection reoccurrence के chances बढ़ जाते हैं, and that too with a more resistance bacteria. That's why. Okay. So you have all this background of TB. Let's talk about a little bit in detail about what causes the TB, what is the reason behind. Of course, Mycobacterium tuberculosis means it is the, as we have told you, that is an infectious disease basically affecting the lung. So Mycobacterium tuberculosis, it can be present in two forms, either as a latent TB infection, in short form we call as LTBI, or as a progressive active disease. So what is the difference between an infection and a disease? The latter typically causes progressive destructions of the lungs, leading to the death in most patients who do not receive the treatment. So when the disease it becomes progressive, it destructs the lung and it may lead to the death. And also when the person is at this active stage, then only he or she can transmit the disease from one person to another person. Only in the active stage, means the bacteria is dividing very fast and it has eaten up the tissue, lung tissue, and forms the cavities in the lungs. Only then it infects the other person, because at that stage only, when the person coughs or sneezes, the bacteria start coming into the cough or the sneeze of that person. Otherwise, if the bacteria just infect the person and the disease it not progress into the active state, then the person is not an active carrier of the disease. अगर किसी इंसान को सिर्फ बैक्टीरिया ने इन्फेक्ट किया है, लेकिन वो डिजीज जो है, बैक्टीरिया जो है वो डिवाइड नहीं हुआ है lungs में जाकर के, because of our strong immune system, our immune system does not allow that bacteria to divide actively into our lungs, then the disease will not progress to the active disease, and the person will not be the carrier of that disease, means it is not capable of transmitting that disease from one person to the another person. So that is a difference between an infection and an active disease. In infection, that is in latent TB infection, the disease is not transmittable. Okay. And in active, progressive active disease, the person is capable of transmitting the disease via coughing or sneezing. That is the difference between the infection and the active form of that disease. I hope I am clear. You should be very clear about these two terms. That is the infection and active disease. Okay, so that is the difference. And then there are other
The
forms.
active only they can infect the other person. Whereas if there's only disease, it will only affect that person lung.
In the infection, for example, in the latent infection, it depends on the person's immunity. Okay, दैट पर्सन गेट इफेक्टेड, उसको खाली क्या हुआ, बैक्टीरिया ने इन्फेक्ट किया है, ठीक है, उसको इन्फेक्शन हो गया। अगर आप उसको टीबी का टेस्ट करेंगे, आई विल टॉक अबाउट लेटर ऑन एज वेल, तब हम थोड़ा और डिस्कस करेंगे, इफ यू आर नॉट एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन इन्फेक्शन एंड प्रोग्रेसिव डिजीज। डिजीज में ये होता है कि जो बैक्टीरिया है अवर दैट start actively dividing the person's body. The reason behind that, either the person is immunocompromised, उसको कोई secondary infections भी हैं, और it affects the children as well, क्योंकि उनका immune system थोड़ा कम होता है, थोड़ा कम develop होता है। elderly people में chances ज़्यादा होते हैं कि अगर infection हो गया, for example, if we get infection from a TB bacteria, then we might not that bacteria might not able to divide in our body because of our immune system. It will take care of it. So it means we get infected with the TB bacteria, and it is present in the environment. कहीं से भी आ सकता है ना, स्पेशली उन एरियाज में जहाँ पर लो सोशो इकोनॉमिक ग्रुप रहते हैं, अगर अनहाइजीनिक कंडीशंस है वहाँ पर द इन्फेक्शन इज अकरिंग वेरी मच, सो दैट इज अ रिस्क ग्रुप उसको हम कहते हैं। बट अगेन दैट डिपेंड्स अपॉन कि वो बैक्टीरिया ने इन्फेक्ट तो किया है, लेकिन डिजीज में प्रोग्रेसिव हुआ है या नहीं हुआ है, या फिर वो क्या कहते हैं बैक्टीरिया इट इज एबल टू डिवाइड इनटू द पर्सनस बॉडी, दैट डिपेंड्स टोटली ऑन द पर्सनस पर्सनल हेल्थ। And if the person's personal health is compromised, immunocompromised person, especially the person has some infections, for example HIV, then the person is more prone to develop into an active disease. If it infects us, for example, हमें कहीं से infection लग जाए, so it is not that it will always lead to the active disease. Our body will take care of it. Okay, so that is the difference. So person who get infected with the TB bacteria, it's not like that. उसको TB हो गया है, हम ये नहीं कहेंगे उसको, उसको खाली infection हो गया है। किसको कहेंगे कि टीबी हो गया है, जिसको प्रोग्रेसिव स्टेज में पहुंच गया है, तो उसको कहेंगे कि उसको ट्यूबरक्लोसिस हो गया है, ठीक है।
यस मैम, बिकॉज उसके लंग्स के सेल्स डैमेज होने लग जाएंगे।
डैमेज हो गए हैं उसके लंग्स के सेल्स, उसकी लंग्स में कैविटीज हो गए हैं, द बैक्टीरिया हैज ईटन द लंग टिश्यू एंड द कैविटीज आर फॉर्म्ड, एंड नाउ इफ द पर्सन स्नीज और कफ, देन द बैक्टीरिया स्टार्ट कमिंग इनटू द स्नीज एंड द कफ। डिजीज के केस में, इन्फेक्शन के केस में नहीं होता है वो, ठीक है, उसी पर्सन को इफेक्ट किया है उसने, एंड दैट टू वो किस एक्सटेंट तक किया है, दैट्स आई हैव ऑलरेडी टोल्ड यू, दैट डिपेंड्स ऑन द पर्सनस हेल्थ। फिजिकल उसका कंडीशन कैसा है, फिजिकल फिटनेस कैसी है, उस पर डिपेंड करता है बहुत कुछ, ठीक है। So other than the tuberculosis, there are other species of this mycobacterium. As I have told you, it is a group of bacteria. Then there are other species which can cause the TB or this disease, that is the inflammation of the lungs and the other parts of the body, but they are not that common as tuberculosis. जो mycobacterium tuberculosis है, that is the main causative agent of this lung disease. Other are can also cause this lung disease, but these species are less common. For example, avium intracellular, mycobacterium scrofulaceum, mycobacterium ulcerans, mycobacterium fortudium. So these are some other uncommon species. And you know about this fact of TB, that it is the oldest disease, communicable disease or infectious disease है, and one of the reason that we are not able to eradicate this disease completely is that, of course, the socio-economic status of our country, because it is not present in the developed countries. Okay, the prevalence of this disease is not that much in the developed countries because, of course, the bacteria it get more is easily spread in lower socioeconomic status where the people are there, and so it is a most prevalent disease of the developing countries, for example, Africa, Asia, Asian countries, and it is the oldest disease. And you know, roughly one of every three people on earth is infected by mycobacterium tuberculosis, infected, not the active disease. So that is that much common bacteria it is present, and this was reported from WHO का report था उसके according. So although the distribution is very uneven, as I have told you, It is high incidences found in South Asian and sub-Saharan African countries. Okay, so this is a data about United States. Although United States may be cases in, but not that much that as compared to these other countries. Okay, so that's associated with that. And every year, approximately 1.7 million people they develop the TB, and it kills about 2 million people each year. Okay, so I think corona जो है वो अभी आया है and the people are saying that it is a pandemic disease, it is a pandemic, but in real sense which disease is pandemic? Actually, this tuberculosis. It kills more people as compared to the corona. And those who have listened, and not you, in some of your houses, your parents must have listened Dr. Vishwas. है ना वो बहुत ही फेमस है कई लोग उनको बहुत सुनते हैं so he kept on saying मेरे घर में भी one of my parents one day he was listening to him and he's saying he look at the data which he's talking about. He's saying that corona is not the disease, and actually he's correct in terms of if you look at these statistics. So it is one of the disease which kills about 2 million people each year, which keeps this infection into the category of pandemic as compared to the corona. It is not killing these as many as people as this disease is killing across the globe. Okay. And also with the spread of the AIDS, tuberculosis continue to lay waste to the large population. That is one of the reason because as I have told you, this bacteria, it is very opportunistic. Okay. Opportunistic in the sense if it gets, and of course, our immune system does not allow this bacteria, even if it infect us, it does not allow this bacteria to divide. So when this bacteria gets the opportunity to divide, so when it get the opportunity, when the person's immune system is compromised for any of the reason, and one reason is that AIDS, the spread of the AIDS. Okay, so it get the opportunity to divide, and so the coincidences or co-occurrence of these two diseases are very much prevalent. That is the occurrence of tuberculosis along with the AIDS. Okay, so the relationship among the tuberculosis infection and to transform into the active disease is very much high with the person's immune system. And also the emergence of drug resistance organism. It also makes this disease once again incurable, as I have already told you. That is one of the problem associated with the eradication of the disease. For example, polio is being completely eradicated from our country. That is also one of the disease, of course, the non-infectious disease, but one of the disease which is very much prevalent in the developing country. But from India, India is now polio free. And why the TB? Why we are struggling with the TB? It's because mainly of this reason, because of the drug resistance. And in polio, we don't have any drug resistance. The infectious agent does not have any resistance develops against the drugs. And of course, we have a vaccine against it. We don't have any vaccine against this. Again, one of the reason is the causative agent. If we don't have a vaccine for any disease or any causative agent, there are two broad reasons. Either the causative agent is becoming resistant very easily to the disease, or it is the mutation rate is very fast. So that is make it very difficult to make the vaccines against that causative
Yes.
agent of the disease.
We can see in COVID also, Corona 19 or COVID 19, it has both the cases that it easily mutate and it has resistance for the medicines or the medicines we are trying to make.
I don't know whether it is resistance to the medicines because
हम एक्चुअली जब इसकी एक स्टडी आई थी हम उसमें ज़्यादा एक्चुअली कि कोविड भी दो टाइप का है, कोविड एल एंड कोविड एस, हम एक वायलेंट एक नॉन वायलेंट है.
बहुत सारे स्ट्रेन्स हैं कोविड के. ओके, तो
हाँ.
जो और अदर कंट्रीज में भी हो रहा है वो वायरस, इट इज नॉट लाइक दैट द सेम वायरस इज इन्फेक्टिंग द पॉपुलेशन इन आवर कंट्री एज वेल. इट माइट बी अ लेस वायरलेंट एंड देयर इज वन थियरी इज ऑल्सो कमिंग कि हो सकता है अपने आप ही खत्म हो जाए उसका इन्फेक्शन ना. इट मे टर्न इन टू द नॉन वायरलेंट फॉर्म. So that's one theory is also coming around. It is also floating in the we are all knowing in the scientific world that it may subside on its own because maybe the virus may turn into the non-virulent form. Okay. So, who has discovered this bacteria? Actually, Mycobacterium tuberculosis has been discovered by Robert Koch, and here you can see one of the picture of that scientist, and here you can see the colonies. This white flowery patch, what you see, this is, and you know, and different bacterial species, they form a definite type of colonies. Okay, specific type of colonies होते हैं. So here you can see these are रफ टफ एंड बफ कलर कॉलोनीज कहते हैं इनको, क्योंकि ये देखो अगर आपको थोड़ा रफ शेप में है एज कम्पेयर टू अदर व्हाट अदर बैक्टीरिया दे फॉर्म एंड दे आर वेरी टफ इन नेचर एंड बफ कलर के होते हैं. ठीक है, तो इस तरह का उनका कॉलोनीज का फॉर्मेशन होता है. यू कैन सी एंड इन द दिस बैकग्राउंड स्लाइड वेयर यू कैन सी these red color thread like structures. This is again the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It is stained. We identify this bacteria by a specific stain which we call as Zeal-Nelson stain. So we stain this bacteria with a stain called as Zeal-Nelson stain. They look like red colored bacteria when we stain with this color. When we stain with this stain, Zeal-Nelson stain. So what is the mode of transmission of this disease? So the major mode of transmission of this disease is person to person through the air. We all know that by who having an active TB disease of lung. As I've told you, active form होना चाहिए. Infection, अगर infection है, so it is not transmittable. Only the active person having an active disease is capable of transmitting through the droplets, which contain these bacteria or bacilli. The less frequent way or mode of transmission is from the kettles. Okay, लेकिन अब नहीं होता है. Previously it was there because we were not aware of that cattle have also the same type of disease. Of course, the bacteria which causes the tuberculosis in cattle is slightly different. The species which we called as Mycobacterium bovis. Okay, but it belongs to the same family, that is a Mycobacterium, and that's why it is very much capable of infecting the humans as well and other mammals as well. So we can get this TB infection, the lung infection from the cattle, but it is not that frequent because nowadays we don't consume the unpasteurized milk. It is found in the unpasteurized milk. We know now, we know the reasons. So pasteurized milk हम लोग consume करते हैं, तो ये less frequent mode of transmission है. Then the third mode is the inoculation. Again, this is very rare mode of inoculation in skin tuberculosis. Those species which can cause for ulcerine, for example, Mycobacterium ulcerine, it can cause the tuberculosis through the wound. Bacteria may come from the any infectious water bodies में basically वो present होता है. So if we come in contact with that species, then it might cause the skin tuberculosis through the inoculation. And then also the fourth mode is transplacental mode of transmission route, which is also a rare route. Means if the mother is suffering from Mycobacterium tuberculosis, if she is having a TB, there are likely chances of transmitting that bacterial infection to her baby as well. These are rare chances. Okay. So what is the characteristic of this infectious agent which makes it capable of entering into the human system and infecting our lungs and other tissues as well? It's not like that. The primary site of infection is the lungs, but it is very much capable of infecting other organs as well. ये बैक्टीरिया जो है वो बाकी organs को भी affect कर सकता है, infect कर सकता है, but primary site जो होता है वो उसका lungs होता है. It consists of mycolic acid which is present in its cell wall, and that makes it acid fast. It resists decolorization with the acid and alcohol. Means when we stain this bacteria, we have a special stain because इसके जो cell wall में होता है वो बहुत ही unusual होता है इसका cell wall, which we call as a waxy coating, जो कि इस mycobacterium group के bacteria की characteristic है. It has a lot of mycolic acid present on the cell wall, and that makes it tough. Tough or hardy bacteria बनाते हैं इसको, and because of this mycolic acid present, it is known as a acid fast. So what is this acid fast? When we stain these group of bacteria with an stain, विच इज विच आर ग्रुप्स ऑफ दीज स्टेन, जिसमें से एक आता है हमारा जील नेल्सन स्टेन। ये ऐसे स्टेन्स हैं कि आप जब इनको एसिड या अल्कोहल से वॉश करेंगे तो ये डीकलराइज नहीं होंगे, तो ये डीकलराइज नहीं होते हैं, ठीक है। अदरवाइज दूसरे स्टेन्स को अगर आप एसिड या अल्कोहल से वॉश करेंगे, क्योंकि वो एसिड या अल्कोहल में ही बने होते हैं, तो इफ यू वॉश दोज अल्कोहल से या एसिड से, अगर किसी और आपने किसी और बैक्टीरिया को अगर इस स्टेन से किया, तो वो डी स्टेन भी हो जाएंगे बैक्टीरिया, लेकिन ये नहीं होते हैं। So it resists the decolorization with acid and alcohol. If you stain these bacteria with this special stain, which is capable of staining the cell wall of these bacterium. Okay, so there are these group of stains, जिसमें से एक है जील नेल्सन स्टेन। तो ये उन बैक्टीरियल स्पीशीज को, जिन बैक्टीरियल स्पीशीज के सेल वॉल में कंसिस्ट ऑफ माइकोलिक एसिड है, उनको स्टेन करने के लिए यूज होता है। तो जब आपने इसको स्टेन कर दिया बैक्टीरिया को उस स्टेन से, और फिर अगर आप उसको डीकलराइज करने की कोशिश करते हैं, उसको वापस से एसिड या अल्कोहल में वॉश करते हैं, तो वो डीकलराइज नहीं होता है। तो ऐसे बैक्टीरिया या ऐसे बैक्टीरियल स्पीशीज को हम एसिड फास्ट बोलते हैं। so that's what it is written over here, makes it acid fast because that stain it unreversibly bind to this mycolic acid which is present in the cell wall, और परमानेंट स्टेनिंग कर देता है उसकी, जो कि हम एसिड और अगर अल्कोहल से वॉश करेंगे तो नहीं वॉश ऑफ होता है वो, ठीक है। तो दैट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ एसिड फास्ट। आप कहीं भी पढ़ोगे ना एसिड फास्ट आएगा। तो अब आप ये समझो कि एसिड फास्ट क्या होता है बेसिकली। तो एसिड फास्ट यही होता है कि आप इस बैक्टीरिया को जब जील नेल्सन स्टेन से स्टेन करते हैं, तो वो जो रेड कलर का स्टेन है, अगर आप उसको डीकलराइज करना चाहेंगे दोबारा से एसिड या अल्कोहल में वॉश करके, वो वॉश्ड ऑफ नहीं होगा। So those type of group of bacteria which show this characteristics, their color stain is doesn't wash off with acid and alcohol, are called as acid fast bacteria. They are aerobic and non-motile bacteria. Aerobic, that's why they are oxygen-loving bacteria. That's why the primary site of infection or their preferable site of infection is the lungs. As I have told you, they are capable of infecting other body parts as well, but it is the lung which they primarily target and infect because they are aerobic in nature and non-motile. And one of the important thing is that they multiply very slowly and they remain dormant for decades. So division rate होता है, and that is one of the reason behind that it is able to evade our immune system because it is very slowly multiplying. कोई चीज हमारी बॉडी में अगर बहुत जल्दी मल्टीप्लाई करती है, उसका नंबर ऑफ पार्टिकल्स जो हैं या नंबर ऑफ बैक्टीरिया बहुत ज्यादा हो जाते हैं पॉपुलेशन, तो हमारा इम्यून सिस्टम उसको फटाफट से रिकॉग्नाइज कर लेता है। बट अगर कोई पॉजिटिव एजेंट बहुत स्लो डिवाइडिंग है, तो इट विल टेक आवर इम्यून सिस्टम टेक टाइम टू रिकॉग्नाइज इज एज अ फॉरेन पार्टिकल। सो that is one of the reason that it is able to evade our immune system, and that is one of the reason of relapse of this disease. What is it can remain dormant for decades. तो relapse होने के chances भी इसीलिए ज्यादा हैं कि हम if we leave the treatment, antibiotics जो देते हैं, अगर उसको हम बीच में छोड़ देंगे, तो इसलिए भी कि डॉर्मेंट हो जाता है ये बैक्टीरिया। दिस स्लाइड इज शोइंग स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ द सेल वॉल ऑफ द bacteria, as I have told you, that is it has a lipid rich cell wall. So lipid rich, which we are calling as a mycolic acid. Okay, it's very unusual characteristic of these group of bacteria which we call as CMN group of bacteria. These the abbreviation is used for three different cyanobacteria. One is Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and N is for another bacteria. So only these three groups of bacteria, they have this type of characteristics, which having this unusual cell wall of lipid, which is mycolic acid. Okay, and this is the uh, protein cover of this bacteria polypeptide, which we call as PPD, purified protein derivative, which actually used in diagnosing this bacterial infection. We will talk about how this purified protein derivative which is a part of its cell membrane, polypeptide, a protein, which is used to diagnose the infection of this bacteria. Okay. So, what are the sites which are involved with the tuberculosis infection? The primary site, as I have told you, it is the lungs, and when it infects the lungs, and that is the 85% of all the tuberculosis cases, it is known as pulmonary tuberculosis. ठीक है? ट्यूबरक्लोसिस टीबी क्या है? आप खाली ये समझिए कि खाली लंग की डिजीज नहीं है. As I have told you, the tuberculosis bacteria, it can infect the other body parts, other organs as well. But primarily it infects the lungs. So when it infects, and in 85% of all the tuberculosis cases, it infects the lungs. So we called as pulmonary tuberculosis in those cases where this bacteria, it infects the lungs. Uh, Students, please just give me 2 minutes. I'll just see someone is on the door. I'll be back.